one of the things I tried to do with that particular character was sort of like build him from the ground up from a very different place. So Bretonian knights are known for being born into this, noble class of privilege. And I said, how can I turn that on its head a little bit? Well, fifth edition Bretonia had this wonderful story about how a village needed a knight. And so the villagers gathered together and found all the equipment. So he had like this very bad suit of chainmail. He had worn, outdated tabard. They found like their best horse, which was not exactly what you would call a world class war horse, but they gave him what they had so he could go and protect them. And then that's how he became, his trial of errantry was, twofold of taking this hodgepodge of equipment this village had gathered over the years, and then he had to go out and slay whatever, Jabberwocky style beast was out there terrorizing this particular place. But it was that story that kind of stuck with me that says, there's got to be these small places in Bretonia where these very poor, almost hedge-like knights live and are the mainstay of the force. Like, not everybody can afford the full suit of armor and the perfect barding and all the fancy MacGuffins. Like, what if this is a family that, from the very earliest times, was never the richest, but was always, never rich in material things, but always rich in honor, nobility, and courage. So what he lacked in material goods, he more than made up for in, well, I got to train harder now. I've got to be stronger. I've got to be the best version of a knight, because then otherwise I'm never going to have honor. People are going to look at this poor guy and be like, you're trash. What are you trying to do? You're nothing better than a peasant at this particular point. So that aspect and how that kind of defined who he would. It always made it very fun whenever he was around actual Bretonian nobility. And by actual, I mean landed, titled barons, counts, dukes. Because in Kai's mind, he's still a knight, but he's not that kind of knight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things. I've never really like thought about it. Like I didn't think about it in terms of like Cora is also from this line of poor knights. Um, I oftentimes instead was just like, well, she probably doesn't have a whole lot. It's like it doesn't make sense for her to have all of this stuff. She's got the chainmail and she's got the tabard. Probably, I think that's what you call that.
Yep.
She's got her tabard, and it's notably
Surcoat
tan.
is another way.
What is it? Yeah, it's tan, which meant that she didn't dye it. So, wonder why she didn't do that. Probably because she couldn't afford it. It's kind of fun to write that style of character. I definitely have all sorts of things in mind that I don't dare spoil you on. It feels weird being like, now I'm the one who has information that I haven't shared yet.
I'm the captain now, Kai.
I'm the captain now, Kai. Deal with it, Dad.
But no, it's one of those things. It's like when you think about how you build a character.
Oh, here we
You
go.
know, what what is important to you? What are the details you need to know? And and this is always, I think, where we have the broadest disconnect with people creating a character and then being able to actually then play that character, because you can give all the depth to story you possibly can, but if you leave yourself nowhere to go with it, then you shot yourself in the foot. So there's this interesting blend of, what do I need to know to give this character the ability to make decisions, the ability to make choices, and the ability to have their story, versus what do I need to be able to tell people. And I think we get lost sometimes in the whole thing. It's just like, there's always a story to tell with every single decision you make for the character. And sometimes it can just be as simple as, I like swords, therefore Kai uses a sword. Lances look dumb. Or, you know, and that's a choice, and then you create kind of a story around why you would use that, and it kind of becomes its own little fun narrative bauble. But the whole thing that it starts with is you and this is kind of coming off of the narrative. Why do narrative? It's like, okay, now you've made the choice to do narrative. What's the first major decision you make as a narrative player? Creating a character,
And
creating the hero.
Oh, keep going.
No, I was just going to say, you create the hero, and then it becomes, well, how do you create that hero? How do you create that character?
And I think that is going to be our entrance in. Hello, listeners. I think this is going to be how we breach the subject.
Is this where I'm supposed to say hi rather than letting another long pause happen?
I think this is the part where you say some variation of hello. It doesn't have to be English, but I think most of our listeners speak English.
Avast ye knaves, and listen well.
A plus.
Like a volcano.
There was a second episode. We didn't think there was going to be one for a little bit there. Hello.
Hello. Welcome to the second part of, once again, Kai's been invited back to talk.
Once again, I sat Kai down. I've gotten myself enough food to survive, I don't know, a couple days and locked up in here. I'm Ayli, and this is Kai, of course. We are just a couple quick little things. Welcome back to... Did we settle on charge everything, or is it always charge? I think it's charge everything.
I think we went with charge everything.
I think so. I don't remember the name of the podcast off the top of my head. Oh dear, this is a problem. I had something I was going to say there, and then I forgot. Fuck.
Do we want to try this again?
You know what? No, Ben can salvage this. Ben can turn this into an entrance somehow.
When you're charging everything, you are always charging. So no matter which way we swing it, we're in the right lane.
Oh, haha! Hey, I like that. The name of the podcast secretly changes every couple episodes without us realizing it.
Look, I'm just here to talk.
Yeah. Anyway.
the name, those kinds of details,
Welcome back to Charge Everything. It's been a little while since we've recorded episode 1. I want to say we recorded that in February or March.
I want to say February feels about right. It was definitely way back when, and then it took a hot minute to release it, so...
Yes, so we're back. Some things have happened. We also got plenty of good feedback. Thank you for that. We are aware of my microphone's problems and peaking. I think we've got that under control, but that's going to be an ongoing process. So definitely let us know if that's better. Oh, other things that have happened. Animosity V came and went.
Yep, Fated Blade has occurred. We are now, at the time of this recorded, we are eagerly awaiting the final unfolding as the multitude of writers do what writers do, which is lock themselves away and starve themselves of human contact until a wonderful story has been produced.
That's usually how it works, yeah.
Everybody has a different process when it comes to this, but hopefully sometime in the next couple of days. I know they've kind of indicated it's in process, and as with everything that comes into this monumental of a writing project, it tends to take, I want to say, about 50% more of the time than they anticipated it taking.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely taken. It usually takes longer than they say.
So if they tell you a week, really, it's 10 to 14 days. And I think we're coming right in around. We're coming up on 10 days now, so this is on task for normality.
Yeah. It's kind of like awkward that this happened. I think it's also secretly a blessing, because what I had intended was that this was going to be a regular like we were going to be recording during Animosity 5. We were going to be talking about it. Because that's obviously, that's the way we met. That's the narrative campaign we are most familiar with. And then that didn't happen for a variety of reasons that boiled down to resources to get the podcast together. We recorded the first one, and then things got really hectic for us still. So if you are listening to this, and you're probably wondering where BBSPN is, Josh, still very busy, still got a lot of real life stuff he's got to do, and he's making really good headway on that. But in the meantime, I wanted to keep doing this. I think that what's going to happen is if BBSPN does come back, we're going to keep doing this too, because this has been an absolute hit. I think I think a lot of people have really loved this. I love doing this. I think Kai loves doing it. At least I think he does. I think he likes doing this.
Well, anytime I get to talk about myself and I,
All right, yeah.
there is a little bit of the Bretonian ego that does come out when I get to talk about this, but no, it really is, shall we say, one of those very cathartic things for me, because my base nature is to be a massive recluse. So being able to actually come out and speak into existence things that have been rattling around in my brain for the better part of 20 years and tell stories and talk some trash and, just in my own way, sort of present a point of view of how to think about things that perhaps is different. I'm always a fan of being able to do that, and it feels good. It feels really good.
I find it funny that you, of all people, are a recluse. I have trouble believing this. I don't buy this argument at all from you. But one of the things that I think is actually really good so basically what happened, I guess circle back a little bit. What happened is that, we didn't get to record much after we recorded that first one. In fact, we didn't record at all. This is the first ever recording. It is August 21st. This is the first ever recording since the first episode was recorded 6 months ago. Yay. But the other thing that happened was, surprise, I was out of the country for a month. That just conveniently coincided with Animosity turn 1 through 4. So I was only really back home for the final turn and a half. But I think this is actually a benefit to us, because I think it would have been really difficult for us to kind of get off the ground if the only thing that we did was talk Animosity for several months. Because there is more narrative out there. There are far more narrative campaigns out there aside from Animosity. There's stuff on the Great Weave. There's all the stuff from Neon, so the Narrative Event Organizers Network. There's the Nova stuff. I think there's not... I almost said GP. That's Magic. That's Magic the Gathering.
I'd be remiss to say if they're... To not also mention the LVO stuff that goes down as well.
LVO. That's it. Yeah. So there's all sorts of other stuff. So I think this is to our benefit, actually, that we're really getting our ground after Animosity 5. And I think we're going to end up talking about Animosity 5. I do want to do an episode on Animosity 5 at some point. Maybe we'll bring on a couple extra people for that and just talk about it. But right now, I'm really happy that we get to take a little more bit of an open-ended approach to things. And that's actually our topic for today, is one such element of that.
So the idea behind today's topic is, when you delve into the world of narrative, how do you interact with a narrative setting? Well, you need to have a character. And how that character is developed, how you build it, kind of helps dictate and steer you towards what kind of narrative you want to do, as well as the possibilities for how do you expand that narrative in the future. So that character creation is both a fun and vital step in the entire process of your narrative journey.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing too, because I think this is a good topic, because different narrative events are also going to ask you to do different things for your characters. So like Animosity, or whatever you do in the Great Weave, for example, that's one big group of narrative players there. They are going to expect you to do a lot of writing as well. LVO, you're not writing a piece of fiction. You're playing, however many narrative games. So, your character's arc is not quite determined by writing so much as it is, maybe the outcome of your games or how you, the player, react to actions that happen in the game, right? And Animosity, you can do the same thing, and you do the same thing in the Great Weave. But there's going to be different emphases on all of these. So I think, as an important, just general disclaimer, not everything we talk about today is going to be necessarily applicable to every single event in the same magnitude. When we talk about writing fiction, okay, well, if you're going to Nova's narrative event, you're probably not going to write a lot of fiction. But other things we talk about are going to be super relevant there. So hang tight with us, even if we sound a little bit off our rocker.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think we sound sane in a normal context.
Yes, but this is recorded. They don't know our normal context. Shh, we have to keep that hidden. Shh.
I think listening to us, they figured it out already.
You're not wrong.
No.
All right, let's get right into it.
So, the thing I come back to is, anytime you're creating a persona, anytime you're creating a character, anytime you're creating essentially a point of contact between you and the narrative lore that you want to interact with and evolve. So, in an Age of Sigmar setting, you have a whole army or a whole force, and your character is the leader of that force. And I think that's important to look at, because then it becomes, what does this leader do and what does this leader need in order to do what they want to do? And this is where it kind of comes into the context of, okay, what game are you playing? How are you expected to interact with it? So, for some, let's just call them more story-focused writing endeavors. So your Animosity campaign, some of the stuff that goes on with the Great Weave, a lot of your online interaction, in a broader context, you need to be able to write stories about this character and what this character does. So you need to have a sense of who they are and what they do. When you're actually playing narrative games, it's less about, this character's ability to interact with the world around them, and perhaps more about what do they represent as the leader of your force. So it comes back to, in my mind, in both avenues that you need to take, who are they, what do they do, and why do they do it that way?
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting stuff, one of the more interesting takeaways from that point, though, is that those two things both feed into each other. So they do feedback into each other, but they also both feed into the same thing of developing your character. And if we want to talk about the ways that you engage with the narrative, this kind of writing thing is something that you can actually just do on your own. I mean, people do it on their own. I'm gonna shamelessly plug somebody we both know, Saul. Saul has an entire blog dedicated to basically narrative battle reports for his Warcry warbands, and they're all
War Boss Kurgan, as the rest of the universe might know him as.
Okay, yeah. Maybe we should be.
We know him as Saul.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the War Boss, or the War Boss, the captain of all captains.
The captain.
It's captain with a K and the orcist of all Orky factions. But I didn't mean to interrupt, but pardon me on this. But it's important to say is that Saul has been a part of the narrative landscape for as long as I can remember.
He's been in there since day one. I think he was in OG Animosity.
I think he officially said that he saw the OG Animosity but didn't actually participate.
Okay, but yeah, so I mean, we're talking
2003. Forgive me, Saul, if I got that wrong.
2004.
I actually had to look it up because I originally thought Animosity 2 was 2006. Turns out it was 2007.
Ah.
So OG Animosity, the Animosity 1, the original private to an orc group, I believe it was Dawa,
Dwa. Yeah, those
I,
are pretty
I
private to orcs.
Dwa. That was
Dwa.
2006.
A plus.
Animosity 2 and Nemesis Crown, because like I said, I always remembered it as Nemesis Crown. After Nemesis Crown came Animosity 2. That was 2007. Summer 2007, then Animosity 2 was fall 2007. So
Gotcha.
I have,
But yeah, so
thanks to the Wikipedia.
yeah, there we go. We got it. So, but what Warboss Kurgan does is he plays his Warcry games and then he takes photos and he does blog posting about it where it's like DeCaptain's journal or something. And he just does this for himself because he just likes doing it. But not all of those games are necessarily narrative campaign games. I mean, he does a ton of those with his playgroup already, which is another way you can do a narrative campaign because we know that sometimes this stuff is a little impenetrable. We should probably do an episode on that. But yeah, I mean, he just does this. This is just how he likes to engage with the hobby. If you want to do narrative and you can't do an event, you can't get into an event, but you think that it would be a cool way to do your hobby and fuel it, do it for you. Just do it. I mean, like, I'm about to take the plunge into 40K soon, and that's how I'm getting through 40K, is I'm just writing up my games as battle reports, because it's the only thing I can do to get myself to actually... Oh, not the only thing I can do, because that makes it sound like it's a chore. It's the way that I want to play 40K. I don't want to just paint up the models and play games and call it a day. It's like, no, 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 no. I'm a narrative gamer at heart. If I'm going to play 40K, I want to do a narrative, even if it's just for me, because that adds to my enjoyment of the hobby. So, like, for Warboss Kurgan, that's, as far best as I can aware, that is his mindset. The man communicates in, not in words, but in GIFs. Or GIFs for you heathens. So,
I mean, for the most part.
for the most part.
But for the most part, he uses words. There are words. They are strategically placed. But why? No, I need very orc of him. Why need a full sentence when you can just have an orc emoji?
I mean, yes, but to be fair, he does use words. It's just that 90% of those words, 90% of the time he uses GIFs and GIFs or GIFs. I'm not saying GIFs. I'm not saying that heresy. And then
I'm dyslexic enough that I don't care.
and then for that 10% of the time he is using words, those words are also in GIFs. So,
But no, his approach is actually one that I really enjoy myself doing. Perhaps not to the extent that he does it by far, but it's processing what happens in a normal game through the lens of your character and through the story that they're journeying through. And in that way, you can take everything that you do and turn it into something that has a narrative, I won't necessarily say narrative interest, but you turn anything you do into a narrative part of your campaign. Or a narrative part of your army story or your character's journey. And it's fun. And I wish we could be, well, I'm sure in the post edit we can add in like links to his old, oh God help me, the Twitter, now that it's imploded and become X. But
I'm calling it Twitter. I'm not.
Yeah, it's Twitter.
I refuse to call a tweet a sheet. I mean, I'll call it a shit, but I won't call it a sheet.
Yeah, it's Twitter, but he would build these things, and then you would just sort of watch the story of him building it, because he would take these wonderfully, just incredible pictures of everything. The Great Oubliette is one that I remember very distinctly a couple years back from some of the stuff he did, where it was a journey of how he built this piece of terrain that became one of the things that he then fought over with his group. And it was just fascinating because like he had, so the Oubliette was half graveyard, I believe. It was basically a collection of mausoleums.
I think I vaguely
And
recall
he
this.
had little placards and little names for each of the characters or each of the things that were buried there. And it's these little things of injecting narrative directly into everything that you do, and having a reason for everything that you put down there, and sort of memorializing different parts of things. And I'm not sure what this has to do with making a character, but it's part of that broader thing of saying, what your army's able to accomplish on the battlefield is only one part of it. How you tell the story of what was done forms the next major component. And, when we make characters to interact in these spaces, you know, it becomes, in my way, to connect with the broader story in a way that keeps me fascinated for wanting to know what's next. And that gives me motivation to go out and play again. As opposed to, I think, what happens a lot of times with people in our hobby, where it's you play a couple of games, you don't get the result necessarily you want, and then you're not as motivated potentially to go back in there and play again. Or you're letting the friction of all the things that prevent you from going back to the game store, going back to that friend circle and saying, hey, how about we pick up another game? Let's, when are we playing next? And let's just say it's like, I don't need to play this weekend, or I don't. It gives us that drive and motivation to actually want to go out and play. And, to start into a story,
Oh,
I think, as much as we've talked about Kai ad nauseum, I think it's time to really delve into the Abel Alburn Baking Company
uh-oh. Here we go.
and Theodor Brecht von Alburn, Commodore of said company.
Little chef's hat
Uh,
appearing on your little Kai avatar of the podcast there. Get some oven mitts on there too.
oh yeah,
It's bacon
but it's
time.
time to I feel like, because this is the most recent character development thing I've ever done, and it was very fun, and I think it serves as a good template for what I consider to be an excellent way to make a character. It's not the only way, but it is definitely a way, because with this character, I can go to a place like Nova and have fun, and people can interact with what I do, and it kind of serves as a constant source of inspiration for what I do with my Caradron Overlords army moving forward, while also still being able to write stories and interact and have a lot of fun in more, let's just say, text-based game stuff where you're writing story and you're interacting more in an in-character kind of way, in role play and old. Not sure if it's correct to say the old chat role play.
I don't know if that's correct. Yeah, it's not quite that. Yeah, I don't think
It's not quite that, but it gives me the capability of doing that if I wanted to. But
exactly that door is open.
so the idea behind it was, and approaching it from the ground up, I wanted to start a proper Age of Sigmar army, and going through the different things, that you do in that process step: reading reading about armies, reading the different lore, exploring the options, a lot of listening to 2 Plus Tough and Doug's amazing voice as he goes through like the different parts of the mortal realms. And I think it's an undervalued resource that not a lot of people talk about, but it's actually reading the Age of Sigmar lore sections in the book. So the core rule book, and then even just the little synopsises that they give for the different factions and the different armies and the different realms. I think it's a wonderful starting point. And the long short of this coming around to is I wanted to do a Caradron Overlord army. And the thing that stuck out to me is, the Caradron have always been sort of this mercantile, um, trade at all costs. It's all about the art of the deal, and everything's sort of focused around this pursuit. And then what really kind of hooked on to me was because they have to trade for absolutely everything, and that kind of stuck with me as an interesting core concept of, we hear about their Aether Gold prospecting the most in all the lore that I've read. And then I always come back to it as, you have fuel, but you also need food. And I kind of latched onto this idea of there has to be a company out there that's supplying people with food. either by gathering it and distributing it, or making it themselves, or growing, or so I started imagining like this farm cartel monopoly.
That is the most Kara-drawn sentence I've ever heard in my life.
I know,
It's
right?
not
It fits.
steampunk capitalist dwarves. It's farm cartel monopoly.
Hey, if the shoe fits.
Oh, let me tell you, that
And
shoe fits great.
oh, that steampunk boot perfectly seals on my foot, and I'm ready to fly in damn near outer space. Let's do
With
this. So
self-tying laces.
there you go. And magic floating gold, which I'm still trying to figure out the physics of. But well, it's the mortal realms. Its magic is pretty much what I've come back to. But it's sort of you start out with a general concept that you kind of want to circle in. So I'm just thinking about farm cartel monopoly, and I'm like, who would be the perfect front person? Like, who are you first going to encounter from this? Like, is it going to be like an exploration fleet? Is it going to be a negotiator? And I thought, no, it's going to be like this crazy grandma at like a bake sale for your church social gathering or community gathering. That's sort of where that formulation comes from. And so parts of my life of having to help my own grandmother and my aunts bake masses of things to sell for school and for church, sort of kind of led me down this particular path of the baking grandma. And eh, if you've never met my German grandmother,
I have not.
now I say German in the fact that she's we're about fifth generation German now. She's about third generation German, but it comes out very strongly in her that she was from a very German neighborhood in a very German part of the country. Um, but it was very much this: you will do things efficiently, you will do them on time, and when you bake, you will follow the recipe exactly and correctly every time. And if there's extra schnapps that seems to find its way into everybody and what you're baking, that's the one acceptable deviation. So I mix this then with this is the model that I want to make. So when I think about characters, a lot of times I'm first thinking about how I want to present things on the tabletop. So it's what model do I want to represent her with? What do I want to build? And it's the Indran master in a dirigible suit with a dwarf female head, as opposed to the fully encased thing. So she's coming down with guns blazing, a giant hammer, and or excuse me, an ithermatic saw, which I put a hammer on the end of because you got to be able to tenderize before you carve. Um, and just sort of I had this idea in my head of how this character then builds from there, and then it's just like, okay, now that I have kind of an image of what I want them to be, a general synopsis of the kind of company that they're going to lead. Now I can start filling in more and more details. Who is this person? What is her history? And then I realized I don't know. And that's perfectly fine. I don't know where she came from. So what I started doing is, where is she now? Like, what is her moment in time now? Well, she's leading a small force of my able Auburn Baking Company bakers to find a new. So this is Animosity 3, the Prime Dominion. She's going to basically, there's a crazy niche corner of, I guess the campaign is best described as Oops, All Elves. But it's just like she's part of a force going to explore if there's a new market to either open up or new resources they can tap to bring into the baking company. So I kind of had in my mind is this idea of they got to go out, they've got to find stuff, they got to try to either sell goods to people and open up a new shop, or hey, there's a lot of elves that seem to have a very strange affinity with cows. What if this is like a prime source to get dairy? Because when you bake, you need butter. You need some of those resources too. So it's just like she's going there to try to see what's what. She's got a small force, she's got a frigate and a gun hauler and a bunch of arcanauts. So I was just like, keep it very simple, keep it very, very basic at this particular point.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm there to negotiate a deal.
Yeah.
Either selling people stuff or buying stuff I can get. And I started simple and I let it go from there.
Yeah. And I think one of the funny things about this whole thing, like, it kind of brings it all full circle, is that, both the tabletop plays a role in that, but you also chose to have some setup, like some narrative setup already in there. But I mean, I think coming back to something that you said before about how when you pick an army, that is a narrative choice. Because if you wanted to play a perfectly balanced game, well, there's plenty of those. But you picked something that appealed to you for some reason or another. So, how this character develops from here, it can be both narrative or from the gameplay segment. But a lot of people do these kind of things already, and I think that they don't realize it. I mean, everybody, if you have that dreadnought in your 40k game that lives at one wound against all odds, you're always going to remember that dreadnought. And then when it gets blown up, because of all things that took it out, it was the guardsman's las gun. The one guardsman that could, right? That took it out. Well, then now you're always going to remember that one guardsman. You're always going to remember that one glorious bastard who said, "Not today, Satan!" and shot the shit out of this, it's a sarcophagus. I realized I had something for that, and then I didn't.
Or my favorite one is like, it's when they bayonet something.
Exactly. Or for me, it was my stupid... I'm never going to forget the fucking Escher matriarch that I had in a Necromunda campaign, who, for the life of her, could not hit a goddamn thing with her needle rifle. And I mean, she shot this thing 6 or 7 times in a game, which is impressive already, because it's Necromunda. So that's already impressive. And just never once managed to actually hit the Goliath Juve that was right in front of her. Like, stuff like that, where, like, you always remember that one character now. It's like, oh, yeah, you're the guy that doesn't hit anything. I think we do a lot of the things that contribute to our narrative campaigns anyway. And maybe we can twist this and say that, like, we secretly all have narratives to our armies. And maybe we do. But I think it's worth saying that, though, that, like, you have a narrative setup for the Able Album Making Company, right? For your Caradron that you wouldn't have maybe done normally without the campaign. But all of the things that you've chosen to do that contribute to their development are stories and things that would happen from letting your games be the narrative, letting your games shape the narrative.
Yep.
We have that name. We have that named Space Marine Scout or that Guardsman or that Dreadnought or that Stormcast or whatever. And I think that's worth calling attention to. At least to me it is. Because it shows, like, just how accessible doing this kind of thing is with your game. Because I know it sounds a little goofy to be like, why would I write a blog for battle reports and frame them in character? Like, that sounds silly. It's like, well, you're kind of halfway there a lot of the time already. It's like, it's actually not so far out there.
I think it's like a lot of times, like, the first major narrative thing people do once they've chosen their army and once they've settled down is to actually name their characters. That Dreadnought isn't just Dreadnought number 3 in my list. That's Steve. Steve the Dreadnought.
Or Jenkins the Scout. That's a Glacial Geek callback there. Oof.
But it's things like this. Is like when you're compelled, to, I always think about it in terms of when I build the model itself. Because I always love trying to convert and pose things as much as possible in order to get differentiation. Like, and this may be a quirk coming out of being a Bretonnian player for so long, but the Bretonnian Lord characters were very bland. They were essentially just, the same basic form as your standard knight, just with some extra glibbly bits and cast in white metal at the time.
Good old pewter.
And,
aren't you excited
yeah.
that's coming back?
I have a love-hate relationship with my pewter models. I like pewter better than resin. I'll say that as an emphatic point. But not to get too completely sidetracked down that particular rant. which is
I prefer bloody noses to diarrhea is not much of a statement, Kai.
I mean, so the fast Kai's hot take on all of that, which is to say, there is something wonderfully solid about putting a mostly pewtered model down on the table and hearing it go thunk, and knowing that whoever the next idiot who decides to bump into my gaming table is not going to knock half my army over.
Oh.
Now, the flip side to that is also, god damn it, when that pewter model is sitting on top of a plastic horse, it is very effing top heavy. So no matter what you do, it's gonna fall the fuck over. But there is also something about the fact that when you pin a pewter model in place and properly glue it together, and I've been known to use, epoxy to keep those things together rather than just purely super glue. It's like once it's together, pinned and in place, when it falls on the ground, it just bends a little bit. And there is something wonderfully solid about the fact of being able to grab your miniature, bend it back into place, put it back down on the table, and say, try me again, bitch. Whereas with the goddamn resin, it feels like it just shatters into a billion fucking pieces. And I get so annoyed. That plastic, it just falls on the ground and bounces around like it's a bouncy ball for a little bit. You may never find where it bounces to.
Yeah, that's really the kicker here.
But, you know, I will take the metal over the resin any day. And part of that is metal is much more forgiving when you're posing, modeling, and twisting. Like with a resin model, like you can soak it in the water and slowly bend it back into shape, but you have to hope and pray it sticks. With metal, once you've bent it, it stays effing bent. And I'm here for that. So part of that is also the modeler in me coming out, because it's like I need the sword at a perfect 23-degree forward offset angle, and if I can only get 19 degrees with the fucking resin, I'm just not a happy man. And then the I don't want to call it an OCD compulsion, but when it's not right and you can't make it fucking right, it just drives you batshit insane for about 15 minutes.
I didn't realize you were this picky about the weapons on your models. You always struck me as pretty laid back with that.
There is a difference between it's less about the weapon itself and more about getting the pose I want with the model. So it doesn't matter if it's a lance or a sword, but if it's not at the right perfect angle doing its thing in the way I want it to, I may tear down. And I even pin my plastic models, not because they need to be pinned, but because I like being able to stick it on before I've glued it so I can see what angles and movements I can get with it. And I'll show you with some of my Bretonnian stuff. I actually have more crouching lances than the Bretonnian kits ever give you because of stuff like this. But for me, it's about when I put a model on the table, I like it being in a more dynamic pose sometimes than it comes in. And especially when you're dealing with older kits where a very rank and file mono pose, getting that little bit of individuality out of, things that are specifically supposed to be your character heroes or your actual heroes. So, being able to walk up to one of my units of Knights of the Realm and being able instantly to tell who's the champion. To me, that's about how I pose that model and how I paint that model, and that also gives me extra onus because I've spent a lot of time creating this character physically from the model itself. It gives me time to sit there and think about, who is this person? What do they do? Why have I given them the sword in this particular pose? Are they more laid back, sitting, chill like a Knight of the Realm who's been there, done that, and this is their 14th battle? Or is it going to be a more aggressive and hyperactive kind of pose where they're really charging hard and kind of leading in the saddle and really trying to stick it to the enemy because they're an errant knight and they're still trying to prove themselves? So it's little things like that I think about when I'm actually building the model. So by the time it comes to being on the table and painting it, like I already have a sense of that personality, and that could just be my own mind trick for how I get through the process of, building a model. But I've always had fun creating unique models for the army, and that allows me to also then the opportunity to think about how they can be a unique piece.
Well, I mean, I think there's something to be said though about models that have personality, right? I mean, like nobody is I shouldn't say nobody because I don't like to bash on what people like directly or indirectly, knowingly or knowingly or unknowingly. But like when we say that's a good sculpt, that like I want to build that model, it's because it looks good. It looks cool, and like I think a thing that we say a lot about some of these models, especially like some of like the Warhammer Plus, Mega Boss, I hear this about too a lot too, is like that model has a lot of personality. I think that we are kind of drawn to those models, and maybe those are the models that we like to pick characters from because it's easier to make a character out of, a mega boss levying his choppa, holding it forward to call the charge, than it is to make it out of a yet another guardsman aiming down his sight.
Yeah.
So I think there is something to be said about that, though. Now I'm not one for pinning. I do this thing. There's this little tactic, Kai, that saves me a lot of time from doing that, and it's called dry fitting. It means I don't have to drill and pin little tiny metal bits into my plastic models. I would not have the patience for whatever the hell you're doing over there. I would look at you and be like, you're insane.
Well, the reason why I do the full-on pins is because a lot of times the dry fitting, eh, I mean, it's such a hard process. So, in order to get some of the poses I've wanted, dry fitting isn't enough. I actually have to put the pin in because then that gives me the base around which I can add the green stuff to fill.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was mostly just like, Jesus, you pin every model? Like, good lord, man.
Some of them, yeah. This is the reason why it's taken me 20 years to make a Bretonnian army. I'm just going to point this out.
Well, the bar has been set. I now have to. Oh god, I gotta do that too, don't I? God damn it.
You don't have to, but I can show you how I get some of my poses.
I'm gonna need you to do that, and I'm also going to need you to bring over a whole case of beer because I am going to just. I don't even have the words to describe what would happen to me if I tried to do that. Good lord, man. You are dedicated.
If we had to rack and stack my favorite things about the hobby, I definitely think building and converting models would be like number one. And then that leads very into the very super close second, which is the narrative aspects, because I honestly think they kind of go hand in hand for me. And then
I
a
think
very
they do.
distant third is the painting. I'm gonna be honest.
Can confirm. This man does not paint his knights.
I. It's not that I don't paint them. It's that they get painted very slowly over a very prolonged period of time compared to how quickly they may.
I mean, you're batch airbrushing them, aren't you? Like you're for a little while there, you were like, yeah, I'm finally gonna do it. Like I gotta do this.
I am, and then Animosity happened, and then I had to do my Animosity thing with them. But no, they're still there. No, it's the airbrush is massively helped, but it is not a cure-all for certain things. It makes certain aspects of doing, like, if for no other, I don't mean to turn this from a character into how to narratively hobby, which
Well,
is
well,
where we're going.
you know what? No. Hang on. No. These go hand in hand. I
There we
think
go.
that these go together. So you know what? Let's keep going.
Okay, so
Don't question it.
what I found with the airbrush is, if for no other reason other than it is the absolute best way to prime Zenithal and get the base colors down on a model that I have ever found. The consistency is fantastic, the control is unmatched, and it gives me the ability to play around with how I then add different layers over top of things. Like, it is probably the single reason why I actually have a mostly painted Caradron Overlord's army, because the boats take to being airbrushed very, very well.
Yeah, they
The
do.
knights.
I gotta get one for my girlfriend for her boats because she has acquired a lot of them now. She has one of each, and I'm terrified to help her with them.
They're actually very forgiving. So the reason why I have painted Caradron Overlords is for two very, very important reasons. One, I can airbrush them, and I can dry brush them like crazy. Knights require an awful lot more work when it comes to painting the actual model, but I will say that contrast paints have been a massive help when it comes to actually doing the horses.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, Kai, staunch Bretonian fan, and his least favorite thing to paint in the known universe is horses.
I hate painting the horses.
It gets even better because you play an old cavalry army because you're a goddamn psychopath who decided
You
I'm gonna
mean
build an
I am
army.
audacious and like my mobility?
It's not audacious if you build an army out of a unit that you hate painting. We call that masochism.
You know, we all make sacrifices for what we love.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize that your enjoyment of the hobby was that was a narratively formed sacrifice. I didn't realize that that was telling a story in itself.
It comes back to I feel like if you've ever had to paint barded cavalry horses, you realize that one of the least favorite things you have to do is there's about 13 different angles you have to stick a number one paintbrush that literally looks like you are doing unspeakably horrific and slightly sadistic things to this horse in order to paint its underside and its legs and the inside of the barding. And if you've mounted it already on its base, then you're double fucked. So no, contrast paint has been a godsend because then all I have to do is just slap a whole bunch of this juice on the underside of a primed model, and then I just clean up the barding on the outside, and I'm fucking done. I painted the undersides and basic parts of horses in like 30 minutes one day, and I'm like, I'm never going back. Like, this is the best thing ever. This is like 3 steps away from just being able to dip it in acrylic and then just shake it off.
I have never. Oh god, I gotta acrylic some of my models. Damn it. Thank you for reminding me. I need to varnish.
But when it comes to the airbrush and some of these models, it's just like it gives you the ability to put paint where you want it, and then you can just go back and pop details. So I would say the hardest thing with the airbrush is just knowing when to use it, and then kind of planning which layers you're going down. And I honestly spend more time putting the Tamiya model masking tape on everything than I do actually painting, which is its own fun joy with the boats. But as long as you have what I like to say is like this is one of those things that's sort of like plan out your painting, do the steps, see if it works, and then adjust accordingly on your next model. But go in with a plan, execute the plan, painted boat. Boom.
Boom. Got there. Coming full circle here.
So, characters.
So anyway, characters.
So in my process, it's just like you see that cool model, you want that cool model, you build that cool model, or you have models already that need to serve a purpose in the army that you decide to give extra flavor to really make them pop and stand out. And like I said, going back to the Bretonians, like some very bland hero models. So I started making my own heroes, and you've seen my Sir Kai conversion, for example. Like, when I put him down on the table, there's no question about whether or not he's the hero and general of the army. Whereas if you were to put a standard... Like, here's the thing I'll say. I could go right now over into my collection and put down 2 hero models in a unit of Grail Knights, and you would not be able to tell who the hero models were supposed to be unless I told you. Or you already knew Bretonia. That's how bland they are.
Yeah, that's not. I hope that they change that in Old World. I really hope they do.
Now, the one exception is the banner standard bearers, because they are holding, in fact, banners, and that kind of makes them stick out. But the Old World ones, looking like at least the ones that they've shown, they're getting there. But part of it is like you pose the horse, you do something extra with the models, like the basic Bretonian. Now this could also be the basic Bretonian knight back in the day being so damn good, it's hard to take it to 11 and turn it into a hero model. But the basic kits afforded you an awful lot of opportunity to do stuff like that. Like, I never bought any of the pewter questing knights. I converted plastic knights of the realm. But being able to take those pieces and create my hero, and then that act of creating that hero let me spend some time with that person about who that I wanted them to be, what kind of rules I wanted them to use and interact with, and then sort of building them from that particular process there. But it's a very tangible methodology that I have, because a lot of what I do in the narrative space, at least in the very, very beginning, was about I have to put this model on the table and charge something. I can't create, an abstract character and then try to model them later. I need the physical character hero model for my army on the table, and then I can fill in and go for the details at that point.
Yeah,
And
so the way that you built that army, then, to kind of like summarize a little bit, is that you had picked a unit that you liked, and then you kind of picked models that let you give that unit character.
yeah,
And that kind of helped. And maybe that's the thing that informs, Sir Kai as well. Because, the all cavalry army, that says a lot about who the general is. Because we do make, when we build our narrative armies, maybe we make choices based on what we want that army to be. Or you come at it from the other angle, which is just, well, I have these, or I just think they're cool.
yep.
In my case, for my Bretonians, what I'm doing is presently actively perusing Troll Trader for all of the Bretonian bombards and mortars, because I know it'll piss off Kai. So roll in and be like, so I got some Bretonians, and drop a bunch of gunpowder artillery on the table.
See, at that point, you're not even playing Bretonians.
Says you.
Says an actual Bretonian.
And the narrative disagrees. So
No. You can go on your boat off Luangil and have all the fun you want playing around near Marienburg. I'm going to be over here in the Forest of Artos fuming about you using those goddamn black powder dishonorable pieces of shit. So,
Kai is very, very disappointed in Korra right now. So
she uses a bow. That's fine. But
that's fine.
but when you pull out the Glock, that's a problem.
Pull out the clock. I have to write a story now where, like, they're, like, traveling together and they get jumped, and the only reason Sir Kai survives is because Korra took, like, the Warpstone pistol off of a dead Skaven and shot the rat right behind him, and he now has to contend with the fact that the only reason he's alive is his daughter committed the grave dishonor of using ranged combat, a gun no less, and make him deal with that.
So that's going to backfire on you, because Kai actually is willing to kill a Skaven with just about anything to hand, and a Skaven dying by its own weapon is just poetic justice to him. So,
and then he stares at her. He's just like, "We're going to talk about this later."
well, I mean, part of it is from the mindset of a staunch old school Bretonian knight. A knight doesn't use dishonorable weapons, and it's an act of dishonor. So he's gonna feel a certain kind of way. He's gonna be happy he's alive, but he's gonna, kind of look at Korra and just be like, I know,
God,
that's obviously, go and talk to your mother.
go and talk to your mother. I don't have the spoons to handle this right now.
It's just like, that obviously came from her side of the genetic gene pool, and yeah, we'll talk about what knights do in another
God.
time. I think the other thing I would say is Kai, honestly, ever since he's kind of, shall we say, gone rogue and left Bretonia, he's mellowed a bit about how people have to use things to survive. It's just more of a personal choice as to whether or not he uses it or he likes it. And for him, it's just like, if it's not a spear or if it's not a sword, then get that ugly shit out of my face. Begrudgingly uses an axe.
Begrudgingly uses an axe. Well, like, just the idea of, like, go talk to your mother. I can just see Dao right now being like laughing, like smiling ear to ear at, oh my god, this is the most perfect thing I've ever seen, because now he has to deal with this.
Yep.
I think she would.
So here's the fun thing. How do we get to here? How does a character get from being what is essentially an idea when I've been huffing way too much glue putting it together, to something that we can have this banter conversation about multi-generational character.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I mean, so how do we get there? I think a big one is, I mean, I mean, like, the easy answer is, well, just play a narrative campaign for it. It's like, well, okay, that's not very helpful. But, I think what you have to do is you have to engage with the character. Or I'm actually going to take this a step further. You have to either engage with the concept or the model. Because if you just have a concept and you're not doing anything with it, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you might not have a character yet.
No, you have an idea.
You have an idea. You need to engage with that. You need to write about it. Think about it. Think about the personality. Think about just anything. Put them in a random situation and see what they would do, such as Kai watching his daughter save his life with a gun and being like, well, shit, as he has yet another crisis of faith. or maybe you have the orc war boss and you decide that you got to think about, what do they, put them in a situation. It's like, well, okay, they lost. How do they act? That's a fun question.
See, and this is where I'll go back to War Boss Kurgan for a moment, which is to say, he builds his models, he gives them loads of character.
Oh my god, that man's a green stuff king. That man can green stuff hats like the Dickens. I've never seen
doing it for 20 years, so
I've never seen a man so skillfully green stuff a hat. It's not even one kind of hat. The man is a hat architect.
He is a haberdasher of the highest orc order.
A haberdash orc.
You got your pain boy, you got your big orc, but the orc who makes the hat. Not just the orc who wears the big hat, but the orc who can make the big hat. That's the biggest boss of all. Exactly. With the biggest brain.
the biggest thinking.
Yeah, but, he does this wonderful thing where, now he played Mordheim before he played Warcry too, so he's always been kind of in that small scale. There's always a name on the base. There's the crew is always getting up to shenanigans. But it kind of starts, I feel like, how do you take an idea from a concept into reality? And my first step has always been you make the physical character. So you have a tangible piece you put into play, and then you go and play. And then with Kurgan, to follow his model, for example, he'll go play a game and then he'll write about it in the postscript. So he kind of processes narratively what happens on his game, and that can inform future choices. And especially, and this is where I always like talking about how a campaign or a battle, a campaign being a series of battles, the war that you wage with these characters and what they go through, but the battle itself gives you an opportunity to, decide things. There is an element of risk. There is an element of you don't know the result. Who can live? Who can die? And especially stuff with the old Mordheim and Warcry, if I'm remembering the rules correctly, but the injuries they can take. I found it hilarious the one time I played Mordheim. Half of my men-at-arms lost an eye. So, I had a whole bunch of archers because there's this wonderful Bretonnian headpiece that has like an eye patch, and there's another one that's literally has a band of cloth over their eyes. And I'm like, this is hilarious for an archer, and guess what? A couple of my archers lost some eyes, so we're doing it. So the blind shooting brigade, was born. But it's little things like that that just kind of spark creativity and imagination. And more importantly, I feel like character development is best done not with yourself. And this is going to be fun because the rule I came up with is don't play with yourself.
God damn it, Kai.
There you go.
No. Stop it. Bad.
Don't play with yourself.
I've got a rolled up newspaper for you somewhere.
But it's like when you're only creating your character in your mind and you're only interacting with yourself in your mind, you're missing out on a lot of possibility because it's only what you see. And the most important character development moments I've ever had with any of my characters have always been when I put them into situations where it's not my brain alone. I'm getting around other people, I'm getting their input and their ideas, and I'm bouncing stuff off. It's even come to the point where I would say make a very basic character and then fill in the detail, not as you imagine things, but as you interact with other people. So Theodor Brecht von Albern, Commodore Abel Albern Baking Company, started off essentially as a concept of, she is the leading woman front in this moment with a small exploration fleet going to the Prime Dominion for Animosity V, the Oops All Elves campaign. And it was when she started interacting with the other people in our coalition that she really started to come through. The realization that, number one, Baking Grandma is the perfect diplomat to interact with other people in the coalition. So there's this whole idea of somebody who's very skilled at negotiating trade deals is probably pretty decent about getting people on side. So I became the diplomat for our coalition, or one of the three. And then watching her, kind of going through that process of, I'm a Caradron overlord, so I'm going to get paid somehow. But, you know, well, how can I make the best possible deal? And it sort of came into my mind of like the best deals are when everybody walks away with something they want. And so that kind of helped form, in those interactions, kind of realized, okay, she might be, there's a reason why she was sent as the tip of the spear the first time the baking company shows up in a new place looking to make deals. She's pretty damn good at it. So relying upon my own skill set as a pretty decent negotiator and diplomat too. So that kind of gets built in and baked in, if you will, baked in to the character.
I'm not going to acknowledge that.
See, I feel like you should, because that was awesome. Nevertheless,
How was
you know,
that?
we're just going to let that one rest. We'll let that cool off on the baking rack for a moment, just sitting there like the
Oh,
cookie
for
in the room.
fuck's sake. God damn it. Why am I
So,
laughing? That was so dumb.
because I made it fun, that's why. But, and it was through talking with other people and then realizing that I had this fun moment of, I have a Caradron overlord that has to transport a Slaanesh army to drop them off. Like, how do I, and it's like I would never interact with this. So, to me, I couldn't help it but go, Slaanesh is all about the excess. And I have as much confectionery as I can possibly make. This is an amazing business opportunity, because if I can get Slaanesh hooked on literally powdered sugar. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm cracking up about this, but it was, just these little things of slowly realizing that, there is some evil to Theodora that I do enjoy that Kai never had.
Yeah, there is. It's funny that you talk about this because where you're like, don't play with yourself. And it's like, don't play yourself. Well, Kai, it's time for me to say it. I did. Vaethan didn't. A lot of what, not Vaethan's most significant moments, but like, you started very basic and ran with the other direct and like made it more complicated.
Yeah, I love filling in color as I need to. So the
I
fast statement I'll make real fast here is,
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about Theodor Brecht von Albern's backstory until about halfway through a campaign in which I was actively role-playing with her. And there were moments that came up of actions that she did that gave me the idea of how to fill in some of that backstory and some of that color in a way that made what she did that much more meaningful and impactful.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a really good way to go about it. Um, I didn't do that. I did the opposite. I started with I'm not going to say that. Okay, let's keep this filling in color analogy going. I didn't start with some basic line art. I started with a really complicated black and white picture. and I've slowly painted in little bits of it here and there as I go. I won't go so far as to say that Vaethan's most significant moments have been on her own. I think a good chunk of those things has, but I think what I've really done is, rather than making the most significant moments on her own or just myself, I think what I've done is I've let people's interactions with her shape her, and then presented things in her private life that only get to happen because of these things. So, like, Animosity 5, Vaethan takes another player character under her wing. She takes Keto Takara under her name. And Takara is a really young, probably like 21 or 23. I think her player character said like 23 years old at most. Fighter who has no experience whatsoever. And then she says, "Well, I'm here because I want to get experience for my warband so that we can go back home and retake my homeland that we lost in a coup." And Vaethan looks at her, sees a bit of herself in her that she would not have gotten to see without stuff from Animosity 4, and went, "I have to make sure that she lives, because I'm not going to let her make the same mistakes I did." Even if she doesn't really realize that's what she's feeling, because she really doesn't. But, over the course of several turns of collaborating with this player and working with her, we hit that point where Vaethan, I think one of the most important stories I wrote is not a story for a turn. It is not a story about with other player characters. It is wholly within the faction of Vaethan talking to a shaman, asking for advice for the first time ever. But that would never have happened without all of the other things with Keto Takara. That doesn't get to happen. Vaethan doesn't get to have that conversation. Instead, I think what happens is, without Takara, Vaethan pushes back really hard on what she's been learning about herself, and she becomes even colder and more distant. It's a different way of letting your interactions with a different player
Not playing with
shape you.
yourself, though.
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure my computer is okay. It just, the fan and everything just kicked up real quick. That's another way to do that, where you do have significant moments with other characters, but you also think about that character's private life, and you say there is significance here because of something with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I am actually happy that I've done that. I wish I had a model of Vaethan to put on the tabletop. I'm finally working on one. It's been 2 years. But I also haven't played Tabletop Age of Sigmar in a year. And then the last time I played before that was, it was probably 3 years ago. Or like 3 years before that. So, now I'm only just now getting the resources to do Cai's method. But thanks to participating in campaigns that emphasized a lot of writing and stuff, made that possible for me.
Yeah, and this is something I come back when I look at it is like how I make a character for, say, Dungeons and Dragons versus how I make a character for an AOS. AOS being a predominantly, war game where you need the models to move around the table kind of really dictates to me how I need to, that's how I need to make an AOS character. Now, the crazy thing is for Dungeons and Dragons, you don't really need to have a physical model. You can theater of your mind this whole way through. But what you need in a character for that game is very different than what you need for a character, say, in an Age of Sigmar campaign or a narrative event. But I think the process for me is still kind of the same. Like, I find myself, now, granted, once my D&D group found out, so this is where I get to make fun of the fact that I am kind of reclusive. They found out through my wife that I paint miniatures. And then my wife posted a couple of pictures of the stuff I painted, and then they demanded I bring over, so God bless him, my dungeon master in the current campaign that we're in. We're kind of in a futuristic setting where there's airships. So he had me bring over a bunch of the Caradron Overlord stuff I had, and then they were all like flabbergasted and blown away by my frigate, and I'm going like, well, this is my first frigate. I'm sorry if it doesn't look too great, and they're just like, what are you talking about? This is absolutely fantastic. Now,
I'm
but
noticing a pattern here with when somebody says this isn't that good, and everybody's like, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life."
I
This
mean,
keeps coming up.
I had that moment because part of it is like I'm so connected into um, watching other people and what they do. Like you can't not enjoy the AOS hobby without seeing some of the absolutely fantastic painters out there. And this is why I officially, even on my profiles on the few places where I actually have a social media presence, I talk about I'm mid-tier mediocre. Um, and that's not as much a dig at my own skill as acknowledgement of people who dedicate far more time and passion into painting than I do. Some mad respect out there to, I mean, even old school Warhammer Fantasy Battle players knew that when the White Dwarf showed pictures of what was coming out of the Italian and French Golden Demon winners, knew there's some catching up to do with the American side. Because there's some
Yeah.
people who were legitimately professional artists, in the early 2000s who decided to try this whole miniature painting that really introduced us to some fantastic stuff. So that's more my acknowledgement of there's so much better out there. Now I'm very proud of what I do and of how good I feel my miniatures look when I put them on the table. But there's also a point at which I know that you know I acknowledge my place in the greater realm. Nevertheless, where I'm going with this is to say that with the Dungeons and Dragons character, I still feel like I need to make the physical model first in order to get all the details. Like I need to have a physical manifestation I can put down, and that just could be the way I think or the way I do. But anytime I've created a concept, it never really comes into shape until I find the model.
You see, it's funny because I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
I don't want. I have only recently been inspired to get a physical model for Vaethan because I've played her long enough to know how she should look. What is her pose now? I'm far enough along to do that. If this was going to be like an orc mega boss, I don't want to. I'm not just going to get the regular orc mega boss. No, I'm going to kit bash something and I'm going to make green stuff work because now I have an idea of who this character is and what they should be. But we also played very different campaigns. Nemesis Crown was built around gameplay primarily, with narrative battle report writing. Animosity, I can just write short stories and poems, and that counts. That's enough. I don't have to actually ever play a game. We have people who play Animosity who literally own 0 models and only read the Black Library books.
Yep.
Animosity is competitive fan fiction for them, and it is the coolest thing on the planet.
And it's one of the things that we very strongly believe in. Once again, me pimping the campaign that I'm most connected to and part of, that the original Animosity campaign started out as basically an extension of like Nemesis Crown. It was about battle reports that you reported because you played a physical game. The narrative side of it didn't really develop until we realized, that this was a necessary and wonderful aspect to it. Like when your battle reports became more interesting than the battle you played at times for people and the character development people were doing with it. That was the realization to say it needs to be its own thing. And that's one of the elements of the campaign that I genuinely and truly love is you can never play a single game and yet you can write and still impact the campaign itself. And for me, it allows your approach. It allows you having the concept, the idea, the character, the story before it becomes a physically manifested model on the tabletop. And for me, it's kind of going backwards. But part of that is just because I've always been, with my narrative, and I've come to kind of realize this after our last conversation, it's just like, I'm very, very rooted in what happens on the tabletop.
You really are. And I don't think
And
that's a bad thing. I actually kind of envy that a little bit. But I think it's not.
Like, my mindset has always been, how does this play on the tabletop? Where when I put this character on the tabletop, what's going to happen? Like, and part of that is, I think it's what I ultimately want out of my gaming experience is I want to go out and play Age of Sigmar. I want to go out and play Warcry. God help me, I want to go out and play my 40K. Um, that's my primary motivation, and then kind of everything develops around that from there. The fact that I have probably written 100 times more stories than battles played. The fact that I've probably spent more time in front of a word processor than I ever have. Um, Probably the only thing I've done more of is convert and build models. And even then, I think I've actually written twice as much story, or spent twice as much time writing story than I have. But to me, it's like when I write, I'm even putting the model of the character I'm writing in front of me. Again, but that's also my process. Now, there could also be that, I always want something tangible to touchstone to. And that helps ground me when I do write and when I do imagine things. But at the same time I was developing Sir Kai, at the same time I was starting my journey into narrative wargaming, or just wargaming period, with the original fantasy battles, I was also part of, albeit the very small, um, and this is kind of going to blow another hole in my whole reclusive thing, but I talked about being a part of the Society for Creative Anachronism. I was also part of the Ohio State Ren Fair. So I was also hip deep in developing Ren Fair characters and personas. And one of the things that they always kind of hammered into us is, if you can't pitch your character in a sentence, the character's too complicated. Like, you can have reasons and you can have stories to tell. Like, if I'm wearing a sword, then I have a story to tell people about that sword as part of my performance. But that, I shouldn't have to tell you about my sword for you to recognize who my character is. If I'm a fighter, it's because I've got that swagger, I'm dressed a certain kind of way, I'm puffing my chest out, and I'm looking to pick fights with other characters wandering around. Um, but that kind of always kind of stuck in the back of my head too, which is, you know, keep it simple, but have things that you can go to explain, as part of a broader storytelling. And I think, you know, part of that performative aspect also informs how I do things. And kind of why I'm kind of a bit mercurial when it comes to not filling in backstory, but stealing shamelessly for things that fit my backstory perfectly when the moment comes that I need it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point, though. Is modem noises.
Well, there was a wonderful, wonderful test that I used to do, and it was called 100 Questions. And what it was is, it was a list of 100 questions that I would get handed, um, from the people who came up with this concept and idea. And it was basic things that you might be asked when you were performing as a Ren Fair character. And so your ability to, on the spot, come up with answers to those was less about necessarily creating a complicated and in-depth backstory, as much as it was about having a really good core idea of who your character is in order that you can on the cuff respond. And I've kind of always built it that way. Now, I could write 16 pages of backstory for some of the characters I performed as, much the same way that I could probably write several novels about Sir Kai Leonis, but most of what it came back to was interacting with other people and then building off of those interactions to further drive and point in the direction they go. Now, I've never been a huge fan of people who write out very complicated backstories before they've interacted with anyone, because I kind of feel like you're locking yourself in a box in case you need to change an aspect of your character.
Yeah. No, that's the
And
tricky one.
and to me, it's about, and you always need to have the flexibility to change.
Yeah.
Whether that's because something has happened to the character that makes them want to change, or you find that your character doesn't interact well with the other characters around you. And I think that was also a very big one that came out of some of that performance stuff that I've done, as well as just role play in general. It's just like, if you're going to be in a social setting, you shouldn't have an antisocial character. You have a character who doesn't like to talk, but as long as they're able to interact with other people around them in a new way, that's good. And the thing I've always found, and I don't mean to sound like I'm impugning your honor on anything here, uh, but
Bring
more
it
to
on.
kind.
Be audacious. Charge me.
Okay. Some of the complication, some of the I can use words today.
Haha, the gremlins have deemed you
Yeah.
incorrect.
Here,
Next question.
let me grab this sip of tea.
I've debated getting the meat out to try to kind of loosen up a bit.
A little honey on the throat is going to be important, but no, I feel like some of the problems that a lot of people run into, especially with a character like the Ethan, and especially some of the choices you've made for them, is, I think my biggest criticism of you is to say you already know where you want to go.
Exactly. And
You you
that's the thing I actually kick myself for as well.
you have already predetermined the future for your character, and I am a huge advocate, especially when, and again, this is going to come back to my tabletop thing. It's just like putting a character on the tabletop in full anticipation of, after turn one, I could be picking that character back up off the table. Like, there is a thing about knowing the future that dramatically impacts how you deal with the present.
Yes
And
and
it's,
no.
in my opinion, now, there are good aspects to knowing where the story ends, particularly if you're writing it. But I've always felt like I've been at my most best narratively if I never knew the end, and I'm letting the campaign, I'm letting the battle, I'm letting the moment take me. Because then I'm reacting to what's going around me, and then I get to have a lot of fun when I fail.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the amusing thing to me. It's just like, I love having characters who, in all the campaigns where it's been an option for your character to potentially die, I have always put my characters at risk.
Yeah.
Always. Like, even to the point where the Green Knight in this last campaign showed up for one turn, he's death or glorying it. Like, he is,
I'm gonna laugh so hard if Kai perma dies here. I'm gonna be
but it's,
sad, but it'll also be kind of amazing.
I mean, he's already dead, so what is he going to do? Die more? I mean, as a sacred protector, Green Knight, he disappears for us. He returns like a demon. Let's say 7 days, 7 months, 7 years, he comes back.
He
So,
comes
but
back. He comes back because Vaith is bathing at that damn river again, and she's just like, "Why the fuck are you still here?"
he's like, I don't fucking know.
It's like, I don't fucking know.
I
All I
can't
know is
die.
you keep taking baths and I keep showing up.
That's its own. That gives the wrong impression on certain levels.
Um,
But
it does, but Dao is still laughing, so it's fine. But
we know we know what happens in those moments. But it's it's still that point of risk, never knowing what's going to happen and where direction it goes. And it's just like, and I have fun. And this could be the other thing too. Like, I have fun getting into the mindset of somebody who's about to go and face their demise. Because to me, it reinforces what they're doing is important. Like, the final battles with the Abel Auburn Baking Company and in the Prime Dominion campaign, I think stands out is, Theodora going, I've been sent here to open a new bakery, to find new items to trade. I'm here for the fucking butter. And here I am suiting up potentially to go to my death, leading all of my baking company to its death, on a risk of a dice that the reward that we're going to get from doing this is going to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting mind space for somebody who's essentially, there to make a profit, is the ultimate risk versus reward balance sheet with their own mortality. Sir Kai, very different mind space when he faces death, where it's just like, you know, he's checking to make sure the nobility of the cause is worth sacrificing for. Or it's Tuesday and he's a knight of fucking Bretonia. So of course he's going to charge it and come what may, which is a very casual way to heroicism in certain regards, but for some of the things that he does, it is like his level of what is brave is radically different. But
Yeah.
it's having that moment with yourself that I think also helps me with understanding who my characters are and what they're doing, because it's always the reinforcement of, if they're going to die, am I doing the right thing by them?
Exactly. And that's actually my defense on this, was for I did plan a lot of it out. Part of it was not that I have a story already written that I want to tell. I have some ideas and beats of how I want this of like how this character could grow and change, but it's not like written point for point for point. I didn't plan on Vaethan proposing to Hitomi until Kai decided to say, "What do you do now, Law Mother?" And then she's like, "Well, I'm gonna do the thing you did. Hey, babe, you want to get married?" Which,
I mean, he was kind of focused more on the battle. If I'm gonna be honest.
well, yeah,
He's like, what do you do now that you're? Oh, God, this battle was insane.
this
But
battle was done. We're gonna have to do a whole we're gonna have to do an episode to talk about Animosity V. I think just talk about just gush about it, to just say this was really fun and awesome and this is why you should do this. But
I feel like there's a whole subsection of Charge Everything podcasts that need to be just war stories.
there will be. That's going to be a thing, I promise you. I don't know how many people will listen to it, but we're going to do it because their story's worth telling. And that's exactly my point. I did not wager Vaethan's life because I looked at I thought about long and hard, and I thought, if she dies here, would this be a story worth telling? I, the player character. And I said, no. It would not be a story that I would want to tell. Not because I'd be sad or ashamed, but because I wouldn't find it interesting or engaging to tell. This isn't the place where it's narratively interesting for her to die. And it's not, to me, narratively interesting to wager her life here. It's narratively interesting after, which is why I've resolved after this animosity. That's when I'm going to start wagering her life. But this isn't the time, in my opinion, because and this is maybe partly how I participate in Animosity, where Vaethan is a collaboration machine. There is very rarely a story that I have put in for the campaign or about something going on in the campaign that is about her alone. The stories I've written where it's her alone are personal narratives. Stories that I wrote because I wanted to tell that story. But it's for myself. It's not for the campaign. It's not for anything else. And maybe it's influenced by the campaign, like I said before, with Kido Takara. But it's not... I'm not submitting this as a report. I'm not submitting it as this is what she did in this moment. It's about the after effects of all the things she did in those moments. So I look at it as, who am I working with in this turn? Who am I working with in the final battle? Is it interesting to have her die? Is that a stake that enhances the story? And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to disagree with kill your babies. It is an amazing writing advice. It is often very true. I think for narrative campaigns in Warhammer, it's not always the case. It is interesting from how you do things, Kai. I 1,000% agree with that. because of the way that you built up the character. From my angle, I don't agree with it. But when I play a character the way that you do, I'm going to do that because that is interesting to me. It's about the paths that we took to get here. I didn't plan out Vaethan's story entirely. I knew that she was probably going to have to come down from her might makes absolute right mindset. But the story that and I know that she's going to do that. But the story that I'm telling with is how she does it. And sure, we've tossed around you and I have tossed around futures where she becomes like a Night Zephyros Stormcast, and those are awesome because they're cool. They're awesome. And maybe that happens. I don't know when, but maybe it happens. But I think to me the fun is I'm filling out the colors in the moment as they go. But I'm filling in the colors of different colors of my character than you did. You fill them out as you participate in the campaign and these battles, and that fills in the details. I know I have a story to tell, but those details, I don't know where they're going to come from, and I don't know what they're going to be. But I'm here for that ride, because I would never have gotten to see Vaethan try to be a big sister, which is just an absolutely hilarious mental image. To have this brutish woman be like, well, I'm fond of this person now, because they remind me of myself, which is a hilarious, just that connection for her is profound. That's not a thing that she would have gotten to do in Animosity, if it wasn't for what happens in Animosity 4 with Bamu and Evangeline. That doesn't happen. She doesn't get to see that. If it wasn't for Animosity 4, she would look at Takara and just say, you gotta fight. And if you die, then you were weak. But something changed.
I would also say that's you still having your character opened enough to allow that change to happen.
There was a point in time where it was closed. You were absolutely right. Yeah. I think Animosity 4 was very close because I think I was still trying to figure out how to narrative. Because at that point, remember, Socrates was supposed to be a joke character. Bluntly, Socrates was a way for me to participate without having to think because I was depressed from COVID taking away my research and my hormone replacement therapy.
I don't disagree with the premise of a joke character.
Oh, I don't either.
And I'll explain line afterwards, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow too hard.
Oh, no, it's okay. But basically my point is that I was playing a joke character, and there's nothing wrong with joke characters, right? Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. We love them. They're funny. I mean, for God's sakes, we all love Chungus and Animosity, and Chungus is... Chungus is the light in the darkness at all times. There are a few things so dark in this world that can envelop the pure joy Chungus brings to that Discord server.
Chungus, I would classify as, in this strange thing, I think he's actually one of the most serious characters there is.
Well, that's the best part, though, is I think that is true.
It's like he has created, and you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to charge everything on this.
Go for it.
So, I made a D&D character once.
Oh no! This is going to be on the internet.
I understand.
Oh boy.
I will stand by it. The premise was I was asked to play a monk. So I made a guy who was Charles de Norris. And he was essentially a monk in the Western tradition rather than the Eastern tradition. Very Earl Cadfael, for those who wanted the shout out to Earl Cadfael from last time. But basically a fighting monk. The dungeon master looks at me and he goes, "Did you really make a monk named Chuck Norris?" I go, "Yes." Fear the beard. The beard will, and then the Chuck Norris jokes is, I don't actually read, I just stare at the book until it gives me the information I want. And that was my intense meditation of staring at things. But I basically started out as basically being a series of Chuck Norris joke memes, and it turned out to be actually one of the most serious and deeply introspective characters I ever made, because he stopped being the joke and started filling in questions in this world. Now, did he still... my favorite line was still to shamelessly steal from Critical Role. He was a muscle wizard, and he did cast a lot of fist. So...
wait, was this... This isn't the elf guy, is it?
No.
Okay, because that's where I thought this
Stick,
was
son
going.
of Branch of Tree Clan, was another great one of my
Stick son of
characters.
branch. I
Yeah,
heard you put
Stick,
the
son
air
of Branch
quotes.
of Tree Clan, and he had an episode where he had to. Let's just say that the only way to satisfy a certain nymph to let them all pass was to throw around some hardwood, and he came back and demanded that he now be called Log because he had proved his manhood.
God damn. God damn it. I just want to point
But
out I heard you place the air quotes when you said Stick Son of Branch was another character. I definitely heard the air quotes over character there, and I think that does Stick Son
when
of
when
Branch
you
a
are a
disservice.
wild elf barbarian, which I might add is fun. But part of it is like you have to have. I find it entertaining to no end, and this could be again my personality quirk, but to create these kinds of idiotic things, and then to see how much of a real person they can turn out to be. I like starting with simple, basic things, and then building the complexity. I have always loved the idea that every one of my characters is a normal, basic person put into extraordinary circumstance, and then to see what they become because of it. Part of that I very deeply feel is rooted in my own personality. And I feel like to not talk about the fact that all of our characters in some way are going to be facets of ourselves that either because that's what we know and understand and can easily touchstone and relate to, or it's because it's something that we want to see, you know, Stick, son of Branch of Tree Clan is sort of in this vein of characters I have of the big dumb oaf. And then most of them just turning out to be idiot savants in the best kinds of ways. You
Is this
know,
is this how you feel like you're going about life? Because I can assure you,
there's
you're not an idiot savant, Kai. You're just a dork.
it's more of there are parts of me where I have been labeled in my life as just somebody who's just big and dumb because
Sure.
learning disabled and the fact that I'm a 6'3" monster of a human being at times. Especially if I haven't gotten out and hit the treadmill every now and again, I become extra rotund. It still kind of focuses back on that whole thing of I enjoy being underestimated and being able to prove people wrong. I kind of like playing up being the underdog a little bit. And I really do genuinely believe that you don't need to be extraordinary to do extraordinary things. And I always like telling those kinds of things with my different characters and my different stories, where Theodor Brecht von Alburn, the great baking grandmother, was perhaps one of the most, and this is arguable, and again, my ego could be playing into this, but she was perhaps one of the most important characters that participated in Animosity 3. And it wasn't necessarily because she was the biggest, the strongest, or the most badass. It was the fact that she was able to navigate, like, I don't think she ever actually fought a single thing in that entire campaign. It was always her being able to talk to people, negotiating, making a deal, the way she was able to bring people together, the way she was able to lead and formulate a plan. And there were other characters who tried to make big waves by being the biggest and most powerful and kicking the most ass. And I feel like there's a part of me that kind of rails against that idea of, you don't need to be like the super powered up exalted demon, greater demon of whatever chaos god strikes you in the fancy to be a cool, interesting, and important character. You don't need to be, the Chaos Lord. You could be an aspiring champion. And I feel like, and to the credit, it's just like I groove on characters who start more basically and earn their glory through what they do and how they interact with different things. And it's my greatest joy when I see characters that start like this is why I loved your Socrates so much. It was a joke character. And it started very humble and it started very basic, and through its interaction, it became legend. And that says as much about the character and your ability to play them as it does the fact that it was a good character. It may not necessarily have scratched all the itches you wanted it to scratch, but it was amazing in its moment.
It was. And I miss Socrates just because he was a good character, but like I look back at like Animosity 4 and 5, I'm like, what the hell would I have done with Socrates here? Probably nothing. I was like, how would he have even fit in these campaigns? And I can't even begin to tell you. It's like he wouldn't. He just wouldn't. But you know what's a story worth telling? That the legend dies.
See, and I think that's also a fun choice.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
I think it was the right choice for him still, and people miss him, and there's going to be a point in time where I'm going to say right now that the epilogue to Animosity V may or may not feature Socrates a little bit, but he's
the
going to
spirit of Wa. Now that he knows what Wa is, it now manifests as another. Well, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of things happening in Ethan's life that manifests as green spirits.
yeah, yeah, there are.
But hey, we're in the mortal realms where that shit happens. So, booyah!
Booyah! It's great. But
Just random ass Bretonians showing up out of nowhere on stone horns. It's all part of the gig.
you're gonna make me make this model and add it to my army, aren't you? I'm gonna have to make an army, or am I gonna have to add to her war scroll that like you roll 3d6 and on an 18 it summons this sacred protector on Stonehorn who just insists on coming up out of nowhere?
I don't think you have to quite go that far, but anytime we're in the same room playing together, it definitely should.
It definitely should come up that there's just this random Bretonian that follows her around because he can.
I mean, he's retired. He's dead. He's a ghost. I mean, what else are you going to do but haunt people and have fun with it?
Well, I mean,
I legitimately reported those battles as night haunt.
oh my god, that's amazing.
So there may be a random Shield of Avignon player who's just like, who played Night Haunt? I'm like, nope, that's just Kai, because he's haunting people at night.
That's just God. That's God.
Because, we're an Olgu, which is all night, all the time.
It is, and it's great.
See, that's a great pun, Night Haunt, haunting in the night. I refuse to call myself the Night Haunter, because that's something else entirely.
Yeah. I had a place I was going with this, and I've completely lost it. Once again. The goddamn brain gremlins. I hate this. But no, I think that like, and it's funny that we always go to these episodes with a topic, and I think the takeaways always come from the conversation and not us talking through the topic. I think it's like insight into what we're saying instead of us coming to a conclusion. But
we are very big chaos, messy desk energy.
oh, we are. Don't look at my desk. It's a disaster.
Don't look at my apartment. Between the toddler and yeah, but no,
you didn't dare mention that second one.
I love my wife, but organizational skills are not her strong suit.
Are they your strong suit?
I can be organized if I put enough effort into it. The problem is I rarely ever want to put the level of effort it takes to get that organized. It's more of about managing the chaos.
I was about to say
an acceptable, like one of my favorite memes right now is Kevin Bacon going, "You have to do safe amounts of cocaine."
You have to do safe amounts.
Safe amounts of cocaine. So, as applied to the current thing, and not an open-ended statement on saying, "Hey, there's safe amounts of cocaine to do," because there's really not. But it's more like there's a safe amount of just abject mess and disorganization you can have, and it's when it becomes an unacceptable amount of chaos and mess then you have to apply. So I'm always surfing on this edge of just completely descending into anarchy and taking a snow shovel and just plowing the entire floor into one giant bin to sort, versus, just today I'm going to redo the kitchen. You know?
Yeah.
Today the bathrooms are catching it. Today I am going to go near my wife's closet because I have to clean up enough of the clothes to get to the rest of the closet. Kind of. You
um,
know,
yeah, when you say that, like, you can be organized if you put enough effort into it, to me, it's like, yeah, that's true for me. In the same way that, if I put enough effort into building a trebuchet, I can make a tortoise fly.
I mean, there are easier ways to make a tortoise fly. I mean, a good, just basic baseball throw.
Do you know how big a tortoise is?
Okay, discus.
Do you know how big a tortoise is?
I mean, are we talking like an adult tortoise? Like a Galapagos tortoise? Or are we talking like the basic ones I saw that were like 1 foot and just chilling?
I guess some tortoises are apparently under 10 inches and weigh less than 3 pounds. Huh.
So it really depends on the engineering parameters of the tortoise throw. But
I was thinking like
no,
a
that's
Galapagos tortoise.
we're down another rabbit hole, which is physics and the average airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow.
Or the airspeed velocity of a trebuchet tortoise. Or a dropped stonehorn.
I mean, drop stonehorn is easy. That's just terminal velocity, 9.8 meters per second, or 33 and 3 feet per second.
Do we know if gravity works the same way in the realms? It could be more. Is
Uh,
everybody secretly a Dragon Ball Z character who trains at 100 times Earth's gravity?
Please no.
And Kai's brain is broken. We did it. We actually got Kai to go, no, don't you dare
Well,
go down that rabbit hole.
This goes into one of my rants, which is as much as I play fantasy games, I hate superheroes.
I thought you were just about to say flat out that you hate Dragon Ball, and we were about to have problems.
I don't know enough about Dragon Ball Z to have formed an opinion.
If you hate
'Cause
superheroes, you're gonna hate that. Just flat out. The characters are pretty insufferable, but I mean, I like Vegeta and Super.
I mean, this would be my thing, which is to say that I hate the idea that there are people who are magically possessed of power greater than everybody else, and just we're at their mercy.
Oh, yeah,
Sir Kai has some things to say about that.
I think Vaethan has some things to say about that. Mostly, I want to go fight that.
And call it if you will, it's just like Dragon Ball Z exists in its own universe of strangeness. It's the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC comics that I just stare at and go, okay, I'm gonna go just no.
Yeah.
I don't like you. I don't get you. I think you're. This could also be the fact that I had cousins who were super obsessed with them, and I'm just so done with it.
Yeah, that might be what it is. So,
Which is there, but for the most part, it's one of the reasons why I come back to characters. It's just like I like simple, basic, and then slowly letting them become. And I feel like there's a mad rush with. I call it one of the noob mistakes, which is instantly giving yourself all the power without earning it.
yeah, exactly. It's
The guy who shows up saying, "I'm the Duke of Bretonia. I am the baddest ass motherfucker. I'm a Grail Knight already," and I'm just staring at you and going, "And this is your first character for the first campaign?"
yeah. This is one of the reasons why I enjoy Vaethan is as a war boss, she has to carry herself that way. But the statement I have always said about Vaethan, when somebody asks, why doesn't she have like a Maw-Crusher or a Wyvern or the new, I think we're calling it the Pig Rig, the new giant Iron Jaw thing. And I'm just like, she's not important enough for that. I'm like, guys, she's just a human. A human with an incredibly high pain tolerance, mind you, but just a human.
Just a Yumi.
Just a human. Who has to be a war boss, who has to make that work. the insane amount of punishment that puts on your body. I mean, I think the thing that I found is that Hitomi makes an excellent reason for her to sustain horrific injuries. But I think the thing that Vaethan is finding is that she can't live her life that way anymore, just because, I mean, like, Ritos knocked her freaking unconscious. Somebody in our coalition literally knocked her unconscious in a fight. She got her butt handed to her. And it's like, one of these things is Hitomi, like, bickering to her, being like, you can't keep doing this, because one of these days you're actually going to die. So, I haven't leaned on the healer crutch too much, I don't think. It came up, but only when I think other people mentioned that they were taking her to Hitomi, which I thought was kind of funny. But where was I going with this? Oh, duh, obviously. So, the thing that I think is interesting is that, you say, like, you don't have to be extraordinary to be capable of extraordinary things. Working in healthcare, I have talked to enough people that I've come to the conclusion that everybody is extraordinary. Because you realize that that the average Joe is a complete badass. And it's awesome. It's part of why, I play this. It's part of why I want to play a human war boss, is because that sounds like an extraordinary feat, but it's like, as long as you carry yourself with the thing of you're just a person. Or, she's just a human. She carries herself like she's hot shit. So does every other war boss, find me one that doesn't. But no, it's like, why doesn't she have a Maw Crush? She's not important enough. Why does she have a Mournfang? Because it's cool. It's Age of Sigmar, and we're allowed to, push things a little bit. But she doesn't have a Gorgrunta. She doesn't have a Maw Crush, a Wyvern. Are you crazy? Do you know how big this tribe is? It's not that big. They can maybe put 2,000 points on the tabletop. That's, 60 models? 60 fighters? Do you know how big some of these orc clans are? That's nothing. Definkers are a drop in the bucket.
And that leads into just that point of knowing the space you want to occupy.
Yeah.
And this has always been kind of the interesting thing when I talk about, when I discuss with people the idea of where they should be trying to fit into the narrative. And, there's a point at which I say there is epic inherent to what we do already, that you don't need to add more of it deliberately. And there's also just that sense of scale, like you're in a world where there can be literal gods on the table.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to somehow scale yourself up to be a god. But it's sort of like, in the broader sense of things, having a perspective about where you want to occupy. So, I honestly feel like Theodra, my now admiral, she got promoted from Commodore, but now as leader of her baking company, is probably the most influential and powerful character I've ever had. Sir Cai was a very poor, never had more than 1,000 points of Bretonnians under his command at any given moment, knight. And it was through what he did that gained him recognition. And but in terms of actual power, very inconsequential to the greater scheme. And I feel like that's something that a lot of times we lose in kind of a mad rush to be the most powerful character we can possibly be, is to forget that, in a narrative space, you don't need to be powerful. You just need to be able to affect power. And how you choose to do that. Like, some of my most favorite characters have been just the day-to-day struggle of people within the greater realm.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's like one of my favorite stories to tell. Yeah, Dave, that's his name. I've been thinking about him the whole time. Dave. Oh, good old Dave.
So, for context, Dave was one of our players, or a character of one of our players, that was basically an average Joe, part of a regiment, Cities of Sigmar regiment, called Amasia's Average. And I love that name so much. And it was basically Dave having that guardsman moment of, oh shit, every single time something huge went down.
It was
and his brother David, and I think he had like a cousin that was like
Davis.
David.
The V
or
and there were five, I think, is because was this the one where they allowed five reports for the Weekender?
um
There was
the
something
week
that he did where there was a different Dave that featured in each report, and the gag was supposed to be that they would all die, but it was never clear which one died where. So there was another element where this is the day to day struggle of oh shit, but it's also Seinfeld. I think was like kind of what was going on, but I don't remember if he ditched that concept or not.
and this is even where I'll go in to say something where like that that is a concept and that is a character was something I really deeply enjoyed because we get to see, anytime I've always been a huge fan of being able to step back and call out things as being insane. Like this, like, okay, so I had somebody once who wanted to roleplay being Sir Kai's squire, and they lasted a week. And the squire ended up looking at Kai and going, like, you realize that what you do is both the most dangerous possible thing and you're insane, right?
Hey, wait a minute. I think I've said that to you before.
And to Kai, it's just like, this is Tuesday. you know? So having those kinds of characters in there pointing out how ludicrous it all is always deeply fun. And it's to say it's like having those characters around your own character sometimes can ground you a little bit as well. Like the person who says, Kai, you realize that what you do is basically you're I believe the guy says you are on a quest to kill yourself.
That is an. I wish I thought of that line. Oh my god, that is something that Hitomi would say to Ethan. I wish I
And it
thought of
was
that. I'm upset that it took me until now to like hear that line and have it be told to me. I am actually upset right now because that is the perfect Hitomi line to Ethan. Is just you are on a quest to kill yourself, and she just goes, "Well, I'm not gonna die." How do you know that? Well, I've got this blue paint on. It means I'm lucky. Hitomi's just like, what the fuck is wrong with this woman?
see in the joy for me was, Kai had to step back and think about how dangerous his life actually was. Because he was just like, of course I'm going to go into battle, and if I die, I die. But I'm going to kick a lot of ass in the meantime. But it
I like how we both wrote characters that do that. I know you
and
said
came
before
at
that
it
there are
from two
similarities.
very different angles too. Like this is the joy that I have with it. Like, you know, I think Viethan once made the comment to Kai, it's just like, you do this, but I was born to it. And Kai kind of like turned back to her and says, you mean I wasn't born to do this too?
Yeah.
I'm a knight of Bretonia, bitch. Come on. I took my oath. I know. They they forged my sword at my birth.
You once said the words Kai finds Vaethan interesting, or Sir Kai finds Vaethan interesting because he sees how similar they are. And then you follow that up with, you, the player, think Vaethan is interesting because we're both made characters that take a very similar journey, but come from very different places.
And to me, the fun with it is, it's like I'd almost say it's like they have been on parallel tracks. In as much as we can say that with where they come from, but it was just like, I feel like Viethan's biggest thing was she survives what has happened by rejecting your humanity.
Yeah.
Kai comes at it by embracing his.
And now Vaethan
So,
has to decide if she's going to embrace it or not. And I still don't. It's still kind of up in the air where she's going.
but to me, the interesting dynamic between Kai and Viethan is Kai basically is standing right there as saying, I'm a version of what it means to be a man who has gone through all of this, and I still want to be a man. Not necessarily in the, I have a But to be human, I should say, is the best thing. It's just like, I have embraced who I am as a human. And this has given me the strength, the courage, and the ability to overcome all of these things. And yet, here we are, like, to me, the most interesting thing is going to be when, like, Ethan has it clicked to realize that it's not necessarily. I suppose the way I want to put it is when she discovers the inherent strength of being human
Yeah.
isn't the liability she's long thought it was.
And she doesn't grasp that yet. I think that's the best part is, I look at what happens with Takara and everything, and she doesn't grasp that. She hasn't figured out that there's a strength there yet. So she still has, even though she's like kind of, put her wing around this person that she sees herself in, doesn't want her to die, like something to happen to her, down to the point where she forces her boss choppa into her shoulder, not like swings it, but like pushes it under her, and says, "Run because you have to live." She literally says the words, "You didn't come here to die. Leave me here."
Says the person who says it's not Hitomi's time. Excuse me, it's not Ethan's time yet to die either. But
that's the thing. Yeah, and that's the sticking point. Is like it's not. I don't think it is because
no. And I'll say this: it's like as long as you're serving the story you want to tell. Like, I've always been a big advocate of saying it's like when the character tells you what they're going to do before they do it. You've reached the point where you've inhabited that character enough that they write themselves. Like, Sir Cai is a well-worn glove for me. I can be that character very easy, very, very quickly. And getting to that point requires an awful lot of comfort in knowing who they are and what they've done, and that 20 years of role-playing a guy will do that to you.
Yeah.
Much the same way that I imagine, and this would be a terrible thing, much the same way I imagine somebody like Leonard Nimoy could very easily become Spock. Or, somebody of that particular order. When you've played that character long enough, you know exactly who their quirks and their tricks are, and they speak to you more than you speak to them. And I feel like you're still struggling with Ethan to a point.
I think I am. I think part of this is that I'm a little audacious, and when one of the GMs said, "This is a really good campaign to not bring a returning character," I literally looked him in the face and I said, "That means I'm bringing a returning character." I told Beowulf to his face, I'm like, "I'm bringing her back. I don't care." I'm still struggling a little bit, but it's not the struggle I had before. It's not the struggle in Animosity 4 of trying to mimic somebody. Now it's the struggle of, wow, I didn't anticipate these conflicts. I didn't anticipate this. And that's why I'm like, yes, I'm on the right track. Because that means I did it. That means I'm doing the thing properly.
Yep. The moment you are having to answer that question, it's like, wow, I never imagined my character being in this situation. What do I do now?
Exactly. I never imagined her. Like, the second that Kido Takara said who she was and why she was here, my first instinct was, Vathan wants to protect that. And I'm like, why? That's not like her. I don't know, but that's what she's doing. That was like my gut instinct. And the thing that see, you say I'm struggling with the character. Actually, I'm going to disagree a little bit.
Well, leading into a lot of this, you were having some struggle.
I was.
Where you were last time we actually sat down and talked to where we are now, I would say you've resolved and found an awful lot of answers to questions you were grappling with.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I'm going to say, actually, it's not that I'm struggling with the character. It's that Vathan is struggling with herself. I think that's really what's going on here. Is she's struggling with herself. She still doesn't understand why she feels certain things. Again, she's rejected her humanity, but the problem is when you reject that and you are constantly put into positions that require you to have humanity, You have to be re-exposed to it and relearn it. And that was really, to me, the best part of this campaign, was that through the whole thing, every single character interaction, Vaethan had to struggle with herself. And maybe that means I'm not a good narrative player. I'm willing to. I wholeheartedly believe I am not a good narrative player. Okay. Hands down. Actually, no, I'll outright say it. I am not a good narrative player, Kai.
And somehow I am.
Well, I learned from you, so either you're bad too, or I'm good, or I just suck at the lessons that I've been trying to learn. But I loved that Vaethan has struggled with herself, because that's the whole point. That is the point, is that she has to struggle with herself. And she has to figure out, is she going to pick her humanity or not? So far, she keeps picking her humanity. So far, she keeps speaking to me and picking that. But there's times where she speaks to me and she doesn't.
No, I think it's you are at a perfect point, because, and this is going to sound strange, like, as I sit here on high and sound like I'm some sort of god of narrative when I'm really not. I'm just a guy with a character that's played it for 20 years.
I'm a girl with a character who has played her for 3 years. You know, we have a literally tenfold experience difference here.
There is something like we've all heard the trope, meme, stereotype of the lawful stupid, the boring, the predictable. I always feel like there needs to be a certain level of instability in a character for it to be slightly interesting. You have to have a character who is able to choose good and bad, even if they're mostly a good character, or even an evil character able to do good. Like, you have to have that ability and that instability in order to be interesting and to put yourself into situations. Sir Cai, as much as he is a noble Bretonnian knight, is capable of great evil. And he has done some pretty terrible things. But that's part of, his own journey and his own sort of steps. So the fact that you're sitting here struggling with, she's fighting with herself. She doesn't understand why she's making certain decisions. She's, there's an element to it that you can't explain to me that's saying perfect.
Exactly.
That's where you want to be with the character.
Exactly. That is exactly what I've been feeling. Once again, somebody else putting into words my own thoughts better than I actually can.
And sometimes the outside looking in is helpful.
It is, yeah, for sure.
But it's the idea that when you have that little bit of struggle with your own character, it makes the decisions and the actions that they make even better. And to me, it's good character development starts with always keeping doors open. Yeah. You don't want to wall yourself off from saying, like, so common mistakes I always see. It's just like, you already know the in-state progress of your journey of your character. If I'm going to use a terrible example, let's say, I make a Knight of Bretonnia and I know they're going to become a Grail Knight. I have eliminated the interestingness of anything that could potentially deviate them from that path, because I'm going to keep them on that path to come hell or high water. Now, I can introduce certain interesting choices, but at that particular point, I might as well just write a boring novel.
Yeah.
Without actually role-playing it. Now, if I say my character wants to become a Grail Knight, without locking in that the end result is they will be a Grail Knight, now I introduce the ability of, what if he turns evil? What if he gets bit by one of those crazy Blood Knight vampires, and now a whole new journey has to begin? What if he doesn't make it and dies along the way, but he inspires someone else who may become, like, there are so many twists and turns that character can take, and part of it is going from, their own the story isn't set, so you can go on down any track you want. And then number two, giving that character enough instability in who they are that you can shift major portions of them. Viethan, if the entire purpose of your character was to say, I am a human who has rejected all human values and has become essentially an orc. The end. And this is her journey of crumping. You know, then you've also eliminated all the story possibilities. You can tell where it's, you know, grappling with the aspect of humanity as being something good rather than something that's weakness that needs to be flushed and cast away. Or being able to come to where you have now, which is to say that there are elements of our own humanity that we wish we could throw away and be more orc-like.
Yeah.
And that it isn't necessary, because here's the thing I'll mind blow on this moment. Viethan's end state may not necessarily be a wholehearted embrace of her humanity.
No, it might not be. I mean, there's a lot of different ones that I've, thought about that are possible.
And it shouldn't be.
Hmm?
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be?
No, it shouldn't be a wholehearted embrace of her humanity.
And that's what I think is going to happen. I mean, like, right now, she's not quite on track for that. I mean, like, I've always imagined, like, if she did do that, it's probably, like, in her 50s. Like, it's such a slow journey for her. But, like, it's one of those things where, like, it's possible that she pushes back way too hard and she falls to corn in the process. She pushes back so hard that it becomes all she thinks about. Well, now we're just fighting because, you want to reject something.
Oh, the pleasure in the excess of fighting. Oh.
Ooh. There's another one. I didn't think of that. That could be really fun.
It could be just because you keep appearing in a naked in a river too, so.
This is true. There's maybe she does end up embracing it a little more wholly. Maybe she only half embraces it. But, like, the thing that I want to say here is, like, right now, if she was speaking, it's her brain saying, just leave Takara behind. She has to fight. And then every time she goes to do that, she can't bring herself to do it. Because I can hear her thinking that. And I can also just see her stopping at the door and turning around and going, no, God damn it, I can't do it. I can't do it. Both of these things keep happening. And that
is the perfect moment, I think, for Viethan to be in constantly.
And that's where she is. That's her campaign right now. That was all of Animosity V, was just me going, God, this is a struggle, and then realizing, no, I'm not struggling. She's struggling.
Yep. And then, of course, you had this crazy-ass green guy just appearing randomly and, whispering dumb shit in her ear.
Well, it's funny, because she's figured out some things. Like, love is worth it. Like, she's decided, like, oh, yeah, that's great. That's wholeheartedly awesome. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense for her, because it gives her some grounding in humanity, too. While also making her unstable in other areas. Which is all the better for her, because it only confounds her all the more. By having a solid base, all she's done is make it worse for her. Isn't love great?
It does its own thing.
It does its own thing. But I felt like that also made sense for her.
Yep.
I was like, what do you do now? My brain immediately went to, I'm going to do the thing that he was not expecting. But if she heard him say that, this is absolutely what she would do. She'd be like, hey,
and that's well, as you say, that's part of the reason why you also, like, the thing I enjoy a lot of times in these moments of character development is inserting the random ass freaking question and seeing how people answer it.
It's great. It's so much fun.
And that could just be the evil GM in me, or DM, I should say. Which is, somebody egging you on to make a choice or a decision or to think about it, and just kind of pushing you to that moment of decision itself. But when we have in kind of a meta moment here, it's like this is the fun and joy of having these characters in these moments making these decisions with these things at stake. And not necessarily having full control even over your own character in the moment.
Yeah.
That there is that element of chaos. There is that element of randomness. There is these moments where you don't know which way they're going to go until they go. And denying your character those choices in that moment, I feel like denies part of the fun of having them. And this is kind of where I come in. Like my cheapest trick is to say, put your characters in situations they can't control. Interact with people that you don't have any authority or aegis over. Like, this is one of the reasons why I love interacting with multiple people.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, God bless Harry the Troggoth. God, that was perfect.
And this is one of my favorite writing exercises too, which is, when I let other people write my character. And it's going to seem strange when I say it at first, but it's one of the collaboration stories I did back in Prime Dominion, Animosity 3, was with 3 other players. There was 4 of us in total. And I gave each of us a writing prompt for a part of the story. And we each then had to write the other players' characters in those moments. And it was very fun, I thought, for me, trying to imagine how the other characters and players interacted. And then really fun to watch them and how they wrote my character. Well, not necessarily, writing my character dying or in canon, but just the decisions we were making and how they view and thought about my character, too. And then, when we all put it together in the giant collaboration, it was fun because it's very much here's 4 different points of view over essentially what is the same story.
Yeah.
So
we had a similar thing with Animosity 4 with Bamu and I, where that was one of the best collaborations because that also said that somebody saw Ethan's humanity and wrote about it. That was the most profound thing to me. I did not expect Bamu to write that. So when I saw it, my jaw hit the floor and was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. But also, I would never have ever written her that way. I keep saying it over and over again. It's one of the best things that ever happened to her character for me. Because without that, I would be lost. I would not be able to keep going with this character. Because I would have just made basically every mistake we've talked about.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to cut it short, but I do have to be up very early tomorrow morning.
We should probably get going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten so far off track. Did we make any actual headway in this episode? Maybe.
I think we could distill down our advice in about a 15-minute clip.
I think we actually could.
With all of our story. Same as, honestly, last podcast. So.
Well, hang on. I think a lot of how we do things, though, and how we come to these points, though, is about insight into what we're saying. Not that we have an answer already. And that's actually what I like most about this, is a lot of what we give is via insight.
Yeah.
Insight on insight on insight. So, I would say that I think what we've found is that, when you're making your character, is you have a lot of different avenues to work with. Some are a lot harder and rockier than others. Some of them are going to make you question your sanity or your ability to even do this kind of thing. But you can start with a model, a paint scheme, a concept, or an idea, and then you have a lot of different ways of fleshing that out. But you, the player, have to make the decision on how, but you also, at the same time, shouldn't make the decision on how. Measure on everything. I think is the answer, because we've already, because I mean I went excessively in one direction and it was terrible. I hated it. But once I kind of stopped that, gave up on it a little bit, now everything good's come from it. Moderation is everything.
Yeah, moderation is everything. I would say that, the old quote of, good enough, perfection is the enemy of good enough.
Yeah. That's really
You
the
know,
takeaway from my animosity story is perfection is the enemy of good enough.
there is no such thing as a perfect character
No.
because there's no such thing as a perfect person.
Exactly.
Embrace your flaws. Don't put too much effort into having everything perfectly detailed and mapped out. Leave yourself room to fudge.
Yeah.
You know, have one or two core principles you can always touchstone to, and then let the winds ride you. Like, you're allowed to change as situation circumstances dictate. Not everything needs to be set in stone. And I think for me, this is where I really talk about and have tried to kind of emphasize less is more.
Not on podcast recording times though.
Well, anytime you get me talking, it's going to be, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I'm sorry for this long one. Um,
Yeah,
but
basically.
it's very much like when you have a simple concept executed well, you're going to have more fun with it because it's always easy to remember who the character is and what they're trying to do. And then it also becomes very easy with how they deviate from it.
Yeah.
The more complicated, and start honestly at the beginning of a journey. Or if you absolutely must, jump halfway in, but leave yourself plenty of room to run still and to have that destiny change.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I most deeply criticize, or criticize is a bad word, but the mistake I see most people often make is to leave themselves nowhere to go when they've made their character. They've already arrived at the end stage goal of their life because they wanted the power and the prestige. So therefore there is no more power or prestige left to try to obtain. And at that point you're basically treading water. When you arrive at the top of the mountain, the only way you can go is down, which, as a contrarian character idea, is an awesome and interesting thing to do. But I would contend at that particular point that you've set yourself at a starting point and your journey is on the way down rather than the way up. But give yourself somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Give yourself room to grow. Give yourself the opportunity to fill in those elements you don't necessarily know. Because there's going to be moments where it's more interesting to change your original idea and to have that room and flexibility to do so once you actually meet the context and the people that you're going to be interacting with and in. So my animosity character may not work well in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I may be able to take a core element of, say, Sir Cai Leonis the Bretonian Knight and turn it into a paladin, but it's not going to be a straight rip.
Yeah. And I mean, I think,
You know,
yeah, I mean, in the same way that, like, maybe Cora, so his daughter, doesn't maybe work in a, maybe doesn't work in a campaign. And that's kind of the thing that I've come to is like, is she actually a good campaign character? And I think as we've RP'd her and stuff, I think the answer is actually no.
probably not.
I think she's actually a much better novel character. And that's fine. My biggest advice I would say to a new player, and this is actually one that's a little hard for me to say because I don't like I have a problem where I want to be very good at the things I do. So I'm going to have to say learn from me. Embrace your weaknesses as a storyteller. Don't be afraid to be a bad storyteller. because the only way you're going to get good at it is doing it. And sometimes that means you have to learn lessons the hard way. Sometimes that means that the story that you're telling sucks. And you got to go, crap, how do I fix this? And sometimes you've got to learn lessons the hard way by things not fitting into place right. Don't be afraid to be a bad storyteller. And don't be afraid to embrace your weaknesses. And for the love of God, don't be afraid to ask for help. The only reason I'm doing this right now is because I asked a certain Bretonian for help. And I just haven't gone away since.
I mean, you keep coming back, so I figured I'm saying something that's worth hearing.
Exactly. No, I mean, like, I'm really actually grateful for it. You know, and I look back on it now, and I look back at myself then, and I kind of cringe. I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm embarrassed, honestly. But
I hate to say this, but as an old ass man looking back at his younger self, pretty much 90% of what you do in your 20s is going to be cringeworthy. So just be prepared for that.
I know, but the problem is,
but you're going to have a lot of fun doing it, and that's the important thing.
Oh my god, I'm having a blast. So, I don't know, maybe I'll tell Keyframe, hey, maybe you should just put a timestamp on, like, this last 20 minutes of the podcast, because we didn't answer the goddamn question.
We did in our unique and non-answering way.
You know what? I love that for us, and I hope that's what we do every single time. Because I think this is how we like to do this.
It's how we do it.
It's how we do it. In the same way that I do things narratively in the most painfully way possible for myself, apparently.
I mean, you could make it more painful. I mean, there are ways. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. If it was easy, would it be worth doing?
Oh, fuck no.
And would it be nearly as good in the end result?
No. Do you know?
And this is the point I hammer home to people. And this is the thing. If you're going to learn one thing about making your character, is if you make it too easy to overcome the problems in that character's way, you've cheapened yourself of the journey. The journey should be hard. The journey should be tough. The journey should make your character question everything they are and who they should be, because that's how you actually answer those questions in the long run.
I think, yeah, actually, I think that should be our topic next. Is actually, I'm gonna just boldly toss this out here, Kai. We need to do an episode where I just talk about my mistakes.
Oh hell! and then the mistakes we've made.
Yeah, the mistakes we've made. I guess you can get in on that glory too of
Oh, trust me, there's 20 years worth of fucking mistakes.
Oh no. I guess I should be glad I only have 4 in doing this. 4 in narrative, not in
Oh my
life.
god, I sound like Ron Swanson laughing right then. I'm just gonna point that out.
God. This is gonna
But
be
no.
That's gonna be a hard one for me. It's a tough pill for me to swallow sometimes, but honestly, I gotta get over my fucking pride. So I'm gonna lay it out bare. We should talk about my mistakes.
So you ready for my favorite new quote? Sports ball quote. I'm notorious for invoking the sports ball, but don't waste a mistake.
Exactly. So we're gonna publicize this one. We're gonna publicize these ones.
Oh, we're gonna bring out some dirty laundry. It'll be fun.
It'll be
fun.
Yeah,
it'll be cathartic, and it'll show the people that it's okay.
Exactly. And I think it'll show us that it's okay. Because sometimes we need to be reminded that we can make mistakes. At least that is something that
I make mistakes all the damn time.
Oh yeah, no. It is actually something on a very real note. It is actually something that like people tell me is like, you know, Ayli, you have to be okay with the fact that you're going to make mistakes, like just in general. So for people who like me who struggle with that, one of these episodes, one of these days is going to be for you.
There you go.
All right, let's let Kai go to bed.
Yeah, Kai has to do that thing where he works and makes the money.
Ugh. Yeah, I gotta do that
so I
too.
can buy. Because there's a Knight Cerastus model out there with my freaking name on it that I gotta get.
I
So
gotta do this so I can get some Bretonians whenever Old World finally decides to release.
I'm not even thinking that far ahead yet.
And so I can get some Bretonian mortars and stuff just to, fuck with Kai.
Okay, I'm hanging up now.
I've made him so proud. Rebellious teenager years, let's go! Alright, have a
Get
good.
off my lawn, youngin.
Get off my lawn. Dad, no!
Alrighty.
Alright, let's.
I'm calling it.
We're calling it. We
Enjoy.
gotta hang this up before we go too far off the rails. Thank you for listening, everybody. This has been Charge Everything. If you're still with us, thank you for listening. You should subscribe to us so you can hear us ramble and not answer questions. No, sorry. Answer them in our own unique, non-answering way. If you have any questions, of course, come to Animosity. That's where both of us are. You can come and poke me about anything narrative, really. Maybe don't do that to Kai so much. You can do it to me.
I
I will
mean,
not volunteer him.
I will answer any question asked to me. Now, whether or not the answer is the answer you hope for is another matter entirely. But it's one of my big joys and delights of being able to help people. So if you need help and I'm there, feel free to ask.
Absolutely. This is going to be Ayli and Kai signing off. Thank you for listening, everybody. And have a good rest of your day, night, week, month, year, life. We're not going to talk about that.